Hey everyone, welcome to Let's Debate. I'm Let's Farm, and these are my co hosts Sparrow and Sweet Pea, and we will be your moderators for this debate. Our topic tonight is conservatism actually fascism? And this promises to be an excellent debate. We have Jehan arguing that conservatism is actually fascism, and on the other side, we have Elijah bringing the opposition. We will be having up to a 10-minute opening per side, 45 minutes of open dialogue, and a short closing statement, followed by audience questions. Remember to tag the moderators or Let's Debate with your questions for our debaters. Please remember to hit that thumbs up if you like the show, and don't forget to subscribe for more great content. A little reminder to attack the argument and not the debaters or each other. Now, since you are not here to listen to me ramble on, let's get to the show. Elijah, since you since Jehan is taking the positive on this, he will be going first. And Jehan, the mic is all yours. Wait, can you pause for just one moment? I don't believe that I am getting your audio. Hold on just one moment. Okay, can you try again?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I absolutely have your audio. If you could please begin again, I am very sorry about that. And audience, I am sorry
All
about
right.
that.
Yeah, no worries. So yeah, I will defend the point that conservatism is fascism, or rather that fascism is a continuation of conservatism, and that they pursue the same goals, and they are at their basis the same ideology. It's just that we call fascism what is actually extreme conservatism. So I looked up on Wikipedia the definition of conservatism because I thought it would be pretty non-controversial. And conservatism was defined as a cultural, social, and political philosophy that seeks to promote and preserve traditional institutions, practices, and values. So it's pretty general. Um, I will mainly focus on conservatism in the US. Though if we start to talk about economic examples and such, I might have to bring up examples from Europe because that's what I'm most familiar with. And fascism, I took the definition from Umberto Eco because it's a very classic definition with points to check, which makes it handy to use. So fascism is defined by 14 points. So the cult of tradition, rejection of modernism, the cult of action for action's sake, disagreement is treason, fear of difference, appeal to a frustrated middle class, obsession with a plot from inside and outside. The enemies that are being fought against are at the same time too strong and too weak. Pacifism is trafficking with the enemy. There is also contempt for the weak. Everybody is educated to become a hero, so a cult of death and the glorification of dying for the nation, the state, and such. Machismo, so really sexism, selective populism, and newspeak. To so I During the debate, if you want, I can develop these points more to explain what they precisely are. But here, that will be the points that will be for me to define fascism. Why do I say that conservatism and fascism are actually the same thing? Because if we look at the US, the conservative movement in the US checks these points today and has checked them for at least several decades. I'm mostly going to start comparing when it was the Cold War and today too. But even beforehand, if we look at historical examples, conservative movements, whether they were Democrats or Republican, depending on the time, they also checked these points. So first, the conservative movements check the cult of tradition, because in the US, you have constant references to the founding fathers, to sticking to the Constitution. You also have a great emphasis on the religious values, everything that are the foundation of a myth, of a tradition that are idealized and that you can't really contest. The conservative movements also reject modernism, so they ignore scientific expertise and by, for example, climate change denialism, which has been going on for decades. They also attack scientific expertise, so they promote religious teaching in school and not secular teaching in school. Uh, so this is rather a rejection of enlightenment, because the enlightenment values emphasize the ideas that you could understand the world through a secular lens. They also worship action for its own sake. So violent radical action is valued. So, for example, during the Cold War, conservatives mostly there were a lot of hawks that wanted violent confrontation with the Soviets, that supported intervention abroad. Under Bush, you had the war on terror. Also, today you have a great worship of the Second Amendment. Um, so the idea that a guy with a gun can stand up to the government and is glorified in his action itself. Conservatives also love to accuse their opponents of treason. So, for example, the hippies were accused to be agents of the Soviets and such. BLM activists recently were accused of being terrorists. Uh, Opponents are accused of being socialists and anti-Americans. Recently, you also have the whole rhino thing in the Republicans. So Republicans that don't follow the party line are traitors. You also have the fear of difference. So this is easy. It's all the racial politics and anti-immigration. I think we all know what I'm referring to. So conservatives also constantly appeal to a frustrated middle class. So a middle class that they portray are as being taxed too heavily. They appeal a lot to the suburbs, to and of their fear of lower social classes, such as inner city classes, like black people and such. You also have the obsession with the plot. So during the Cold War, you had the fear of Soviet infiltration, which peaked with McCarthyism. Today, it's the woke elites controlling everything and trying to create a new world order. In conservatism, considers its enemies as too strong and too weak. So they present the idea of a soy boy that is weak physically and mentally, but strangely enough, everything that is powerful is controlled by woke people. During the Cold War, it was communists, same with being young, lazy, naive, stupid, but they were also in academia, the media, in schools and such. Uh, so um, so conservatism also is opposed to pacifism, mainly during the Cold War, by all the crackdowns on anti-war movements. Today, conservatives are more anti-war, uh, but it's rather an exceptional position because of the a will to focus rather on the nation and less on the international power play. But they also support conquering states such as Russia. So so really they still support military action, just in other ways. They also have contempt for the weak, so it's a whole classism by the myth that you can pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, and if you don't, it's your fault. They educate everything to become a hero. So, for example, you have the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001 under Bush, which is still standing today, which allows the army to recruit in American schools, for example. You also have, again, the Second Amendment, which is based on the idea that an individual can be a hero defending freedom thanks to guns. Conservatives also have their ideology extremely sexist, so they valorize masculinity all the time. Today, it's most notably with Andrew Tate. You also had the MGTOW thing and all that stuff. You have also had during the pretty much during the entire existence of conservative movements, crackdowns on non-standard sexualities such as LGBT sexualities, contempt for women and women's rights and such. Conservatives also love to oppose elites, so it's the selective populism point. They love to oppose elites. So today it's all the drain the swamp thing, opposition to the deep state. Before it was the opposition to the liberal elite um, and to the communist academic elite. They also present the Americans that they speak for as so white middle class, sometimes working class, and act as if uh, there are no other types of classes in the US, with their voice carried by the leader, especially under Trump, with a strong leader worship under Trump. And finally, conservatism also promotes a lot of newspeak. With thought-ending cliches such as the words woke, CRT, portraying their opponents are as groomers, portraying as pedophiles. Also, since Reagan, for example, portraying black people are as inner city thugs and such, which are euphemism and thought-ending cliches that stifle critical thinking. So, so yeah, that's my point. I think I'm
Are you done now, Jehan?
yes.
All right, thank you for that opening statement, Jehan. And now we turn to Elijah for his opening. Take it away, Elijah. The floor is yours.
No problem. All right, so just to kind of get into what Jehan was saying about the wiki page on conservatism, you didn't finish. If you finish the rest of the context, it says the central tenets of conservatism vary in relation to culture, civilization, in which it appears. In Western culture, depending on the particular nation, conservatives seek to promote a range of social institutions such as the nuclear family, organized religion, the military, property rights, and monarchy. Conservatives tend to favor institutions and practices that guarantee stability and evolve gradually. Then it gets to the adherents of conservatism, oppose certain aspects of modernity, like mass culture and secularism, and to seek to return to traditional values. To different groups of conservatives, they may choose different traditional values to preserve. Now, I researched a ton of primary sources on fascism. I've never heard of the 14 points. So I kind of want to know where you got that from. And the second point, so some of the sources that I've read on, uh, even the Wikipedia, who wants to say these guys have talked about it. So Larson Stein, Ugelvik, Hadved Bernst, Michael Bust, Jan Peter. They have a book called Who Are the Fascists? None of them talk about conservatism. Um, were they? And then you got Davies and Lynch. Then you have what was their book? I'll get their book in a minute, but I want to continue. So uh, the Holocaust page itself doesn't talk about conservatism. Griffin, Callies, Hartley, Hawksworth, and Kogan are Copesley's book. None of them talk about conservatism. And then when you go to the research of James Gregory, he's a political scientist, well known. Some of his work's okay, but he wrote some books on Mussolini and the fascist party and its origins. Then Nicholas Burgess Farrell and George Sorel, his book is a reflection on violence. These are the primary sources for which historians, journalists, and political scientists use to look into fascism. None of them. I've read them. You can go to freepdfdrive.com to read them if you want. You could pay for them too. Um, but none of it talks about conservatism at all. A lot of the origins of the fascist movement came from syndicalist groups, and that's where Mussolini and Gentile came from. They had origins in the socialist spheres back in Italy. They got some influence from Marx um, and Hegel, but that's really where the origins come from. And here I'll even get to the main points. You said Bush and the Soviets. I have not seen these guys taking any doctrine from fascism at all, talking about trade unionism, because that's in James Greger's book. It's also in George Sorel's book. He talks about the fascist party wanted to have a syndicate, and I kind of learned that in my experience when studying the SIE to get to doing trade. It's called security investments and something else. You got to get it for your general knowledge of investments. Um, there's this one portion where I'm studying it on Kaplan, and it talks about a syndicate. So I find that interesting that that's even a term in your modern U.S. Um, investment criteria to know. That's pretty weird. But anyways, getting back to the point, trade unionism started from Mussolini's introduction into the anarcho-syndicalist parties in Italy. And he was also part of a paper. He wrote some socialist stuff. He was anti-war. Then he kind of just said, "Screw it, I'll join into the war prep," because he had a feeling that Italy was also going to get sucked into a war, and he's right. But the uh, the main points I thought you were going to make, I don't know if you made them, but this point of anti-immigration, only Oswald Mosley, the British fascist, was kind of anti-immigration. None of them talk about race or this hero stature that you're talking about. None of them. Mussolini, he was not anti-Semitic only until 1938, where he put a law saying Jews can't do certain things. Um, he kind of wanted to be friends with Hitler. That's the only reason he had it in the first place. But his mistress, Mussolini had a mistress. Let me just get her name. What was her mistress's name? Give me 1 second. So I got my notes and stuff. But her name was Margarita Sarfati. It was his mistress from 1911 to 1938. Funny enough, when 38 he joined with Hitler and did the anti-Jewish laws. She was Jewish. She was also a feminist and a member of the Fascist Party of Italy. Also, there was over 10,000 other Jews in the Fascist Party. So it's not anti-Semitic fascism, but it is anti-markets. If you see a lot of Mussolini's position, or all the even Oswald Mosley, his positions on the economy, they had a they wanted to get a group of syndicates to be the producers, and those will provide for the workers and for the rest of the economy, but it wanted to be state run. And I've seen no conservative movement who's saying, yeah, we want to have the syndicates be a bunch of producers and run the state. A lot of the actual tenets of fascism I don't see anywhere in the conservative movement party or the history of conservative in Europe or in the U.S. Now, maybe there's a difference between the conservatives in Europe versus the conservatives in the U.S. We'll have to clarify that. But I'm from the U.S., so I don't see any conservative movement pushing for trade unionism or some type of syndicalism, which is the main points of pretty much fascism. Even Giovanni Gentile, who was the founder of the ideology, he was pushing for trade unionism. And the word fasci itself means a bundle or a union of sticks. And that was what the unions were called in Italy. It was called the fascios. So that's kind of where we get the whole idea and movement of fascism. Uh, a little bit of background on Mosley. Mosley was a liberal, but he got beat up and assaulted by a lot of, um, I guess, the socialist movement at the time, and he was pissed about that. So he decided to kind of form his own uh, movement of fascism, and it pretty much is just mooching off of uh, Mussolini and Gentile's version. So that's pretty much my statements on the matter of why it's not conservatism. Um, it's probably just socialism, another form of socialism, which usually is the case. But anyways, that's really it.
All right, thanks, Elijah, for your opening. We will now move into the open dialogue where our debaters will have up to 45 minutes to cross examine each other. Have at it, guys.
So Jehan, where is this 14 points? I've never heard of this.
Yeah, it's from Umberto Eco. You can find it on the Wikipedia page of definitions of fascism.
Okay, Umberto Eco, right?
Yeah, yeah, I'm surprised you haven't heard of it because I hear it
I know
cited
about
all
Umberto
the
Eco,
time.
but I've never heard of the 14 points. Now he's an Italian medieval historian. So I'm gonna look at his book or whatever his points are, and I'm gonna see if he references any primary sources. Now the primary sources for fascism is James Gregor, Nicholas Burgess Farrell, and George Sorrell. So he better reference them if he's gonna make a claim like that, because that's a hell of a claim to say these are the 14 points when Mussolini did not have those 14 points, when Oswald Mosley did not have those points, and that Spanish guy, I forgot his name, he didn't have any of those points either. I researched him a long ago. I forgot his name, but I remember his ideology. He doesn't have these 14 points, so I'm going to research that. But anyways, where are the ties to European conservatism with trade unionism?
The thing is that fascism isn't about trade unionism.
Well, that's
As
this.
I've said, Umberto Eco has done so the 14 points to summarize the common characteristics of the different fascist movements across the world and across time. The goal isn't to repeat the programs they state. The goal is to describe the common points that are observed for these fascist movements and to find how the similarities they have between each other. So when you talk about fascists trying to put in place trade unionism, first is very reductive because fascists accessed, especially Mussolini, he accessed to power in part because he beat up trade unionists. His the brown shirts.
Yeah,
Uh, no, I think it was the black shirts in Italy.
black.
They were famous
Yeah.
for beating up trade unionists in Italy. Fascists tended to establish a state-run singular trade union, but it wasn't to as you are implying, it wasn't in a syndicalist goal. The goal was to control the negotiation between the workers and the capitalists. So by doing so, the state could side with the capitalists and advantage them against the workers. Also, it gave the power of the state of running all the advantages the trade union gave to the workers. It allowed a greater control on their lives. So the goal wasn't to develop trade unionization. The goal was to control workers and to enrich capitalists, which is a different thing than syndicalist movements seek to achieve.
No, that's not different. If you're going to organize workers into one union, I mean, Hitler had the biggest trade union in the history. He still has one of the Nazi Germany had one of the biggest trade unions in the history of our existence. So, and they were not fascist; they were socialists, national socialists. They had different beliefs. But uh, back to the point of, okay, let's say Umberto says these 14 points are what fascism is. And he is a historian, but I want to see his response. Maybe I'm going to read it somewhere, to George Sorrell, who did a lot of work on, he's a historian himself. He did a lot of work on the history of fascism. It's called The Reflection on Violence. Now, if you read some of the quotes, if you even read Gentile's own quotes, he says the fascist state, on the other hand, is a popular state, and in that sense, a democratic state per excellence. Now we can continue forward going into some of the core principles of fascism. You get into um, Mussolini talking about the war. You get into um, him originally being a Marxist Socialist Party member. Now, how does that conservatism, if you're going to make the argument that, well, it's actually conservatism or it's an extreme version of conservatism, I don't think the Marxist socialists and their or extreme conservatives. So, I mean, I can't really buy that. I don't know what historian could buy that either, because a lot of them are the primary historians. We're using primary sources, not secondary or tertiary. But the ones who are looking at the actual data, their books, their memos, their speeches, and their interviews, they're they are coming to a way different conclusion, saying that it's conservatism.
Well, Mussolini first was in Marxist, in Marxist organizations.
Mm-hmm.
But first, he started to found the fascists of the organization. It was called the Facci Italiani di Combattimento. So it was combat it was combat organizations. The goal at first was to reunite some socialists that weren't following the party line. So first, at the very start, you can see that
Where are you
they
getting that from?
diverged
I want to ask you, where do you get they're not following the line?
from the Wikipedia page from
Yeah, but
of
what are
Benito
they saying?
Mussolini.
I want to know what they're saying because I'm familiar with the organization and kind of like the military front movement. But where is it that they're not following any of the socialist doctrine to have a dictatorship of the proletariat, which was forming at the time in Italy?
Sorry, in Italy, in
Yep.
the
Had,
monarchist liberal parliamentarian Italy, there was a dictatorship of the
no, he was not a
proletariat.
fan of Kant. Mussolini himself was not a fan of the monarchist. He didn't like sorry, not Kant. He didn't like King Emmanuel. He only needed King Emmanuel because there were certain elements that would get upset. But he himself has written in his diaries he didn't like King Emmanuel III.
Okay, and
So the point about the monarchy is not relevant to the point of fascism and conservatism.
yes, because Mussolini then developed his organization, the fascists. It developed and it integrated more and more conservatives leaning activists that were seeking to oppose trade unionists by beating them up, and it led to a rise of violence in Italy and the March on Rome that was a military type march to intimidate the government in place. And it led to the king himself nominating Mussolini as prime minister, which allowed the king to counter the socialists because Mussolini was leading an organization beating up socialists. So you can't really say that he was on the same side as the socialists
But the fact
when
that the
he
infight
was
here,
beating them up and when the king nominates him in power to counter the socialists.
but they call themselves the fascists, and they're not anywhat conservative at all. The point is, it's conservatism. If you guys infight a lot, and you have infighted a lot, that's kind of the history of the socialist movement around Europe. You had um, Rosa Luxemburg and her communist partner. They pretty much infighted with the Social Democrats. That doesn't make them not communist anymore. Matter of fact, they called the Social Democrats not communist. So the communists themselves, and here, as you're pointing out, Mussolini and the fascists themselves are calling themselves socialists, not conservatives at all. They're not following any resemblance of conservatism. That's why I'm kind of questioning these 14 points in reference to anything of conservatism. And conservatism has, as you read the rest of the Wikipedia article, it favors private property rights. There was no private property rights under Oswald Mosley and in Mussolini's trade unionism.
Well, under Mussolini, there were strong private property rights because the role of the state trade union was to advantage the capitalists and allow them to enrich themselves in the coordination with the state.
Yeah,
Also, you
even
can
here,
also look at electoral strategies.
yeah,
Mussolini and the fascist party allied with right-wing liberal parties,
there was no like
conservative parties,
those guys.
and they allied to
They didn't
access
even have.
political power.
Let me explain.
Sorry.
He didn't get a lot of funding for those conservative movements. He didn't get a lot of funding from investors. Him and Hitler, they had a very grassroots movement. So I don't know
And
what the point you're saying is they had any ties to the right wing or conservatives. I just don't see it anywhere in history.
they allied to govern together.
They lied. You're saying they lied?
No, they made an alliance.
Okay, I'm gonna read you what happened. So if you go back on page 35, The Origins and Doctrines of Fascism, the fascist state organized and juridicially recognized worker syndicates and employer organizations. It intends to adapt its structure to those united syndicates to draw them into national corporations on the way to a system of political representation compatible with the structure of worker organizations. Where in European conservatism did this happen? And if they aligned with elements of the right or conservatives, this happened. This happened in Italy. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, uh, it's almost like as Hitler having his 32-man strong labor front, DAF, they had a syndicate. The Italians had their own version. Where was it? It was the it's in Principles of Philosophy. Videla and Zeidelman, they both talk about the Italians having their own trade union. So I'm trying to wrap my head around again where if you guys are infighting, that's what happens. People infight. Yes, you can kill each other in infighting and get to extreme, but that doesn't make it not part of the ideology. Just like Rosa Luxemburg infighted with the Social Democrats. Why is Rosa Luxemburg not a communist anymore because she killed some version of the socialist? No, right? Would you agree or no?
I'm sorry, I was looking at Wikipedia. I did not hear
Okay.
the end your question.
So if the infighting seems to be a piece that you don't align with, it seems to be something that makes you think they are just switched to the opposite side, which I don't see any of the historical primary sources. But you're saying they might have aligned with certain conservative elements. Okay, George Soros disagrees. James Berger, Nicholas Burgess, they all disagree. So, well, let's go to the point. Does infighting make you not a part of the movement anymore?
Well, first, you're presupposing that Mussolini stayed inside the movement. Like
Okay.
when he leads an organization that gathers members that are seen that are qualified as conservatives by the sources that I've seen,
Yeah, I
that
read the sources.
oppose they opposed Bolshevism, they opposed Marxism, they opposed socialism, they beat up trade unionism specifically because they were going on strike, specifically
Where
because they tried to seize some industries.
where does this have
This
conservatism?
this is not infighting. This is straight direct opposition.
No, it's not. It's just infighting. Okay, because Hitler kicked out von Papen and the conservatives. He put a lot of them into camps. Hitler was not that. So that technically, by your logic, kicking out your opposition means you're not part of them no more. Now, that's not a good standard of evidence. That's what I'm trying to get to. I've read Griffin, Callies, Hartley, Hawksworth, Kogan, and Copesey's book. I know what you're referencing. You're referencing the point of them saying, look, they infighted. They kicked out some of the trade unionists and the Marxists. They jailed them. Some of them they just shot, killed them, which is unfortunate. But where is that in reference to any conservative ideology in Europe?
Well,
They don't reference
it's
it
very
themselves.
simple. For
They
example, during,
so they don't
excuse
even
me, I'm
reference.
trying to answer.
Yeah, go ahead.
So during the elections of the 15th of May of 1921 in Italy, so Mussolini allies with the liberal right in Italy in a coalition of constitutional parties, which obtain a majority in the assembly. So, for example, there are right-wing parties in Italy that allied with Mussolini to obtain a majority in parliament to be able to govern. This isn't an alliance with a socialist party. This is an alliance with a party that shares common goals to govern together. Then
That's in
Mussolini
reference.
marched on Rome. It was a liberal independent that advised the king to put Mussolini on the government first.
Okay, so the
First,
going against the Marxists who were pro-war and pro-nationalist at the time, Italy was the exception.
sorry.
Why was Italy the exception? Okay, chapter 5, page 10 through 11, 54, page 77, 83, Gregor's Mussolini's Intellectuals. Every country, the Marxists were pro-war and pro-nationalist. Italy was the exception. Now, if you continue reading, you go to Mussolini talking about the war. He said, because I know what you're referencing. You're referencing them joining against the war effort. And he says, I tell you, you're
What?
wasting your breath.
No, I'm not.
Okay, so
I
what's
was saying it happened in 1921, 3 years after the end of World War One.
okay? So you're going before. Okay, I was going to World War II. But okay. Wait, no. Wait a minute. Hold on a minute. Wait, no. Okay, so if you okay, now you got to read this. Check this out. You got to go to. This is a great source. It's from Farrell. Mussolini's A New Life. He says, Mussolini says it himself. I tell you, you're wasting your breath. You will be forced into the war. You cannot get rid of me because I am and I will always be a socialist. You hate me. You hate me because you will love me. That divides me from you now. It's not a small question. It's a big question which divides also. That's Mussolini saying that himself. This is in 1914. So this is, yes, before the war.
1914.
Mm-hmm.
So 7 years before. So 1914. It was
This
like
is
six
before he
years before he started.
right.
It was 6 years before he started the fascist organizations. It
Now, where
was
is that reference to conservatism?
well at the time maybe he was a socialist and he changed.
Right. So where's the but there was the claim is this fascism is conservatism extreme or extreme end. Why didn't any of the investors go back Mussolini in 1914 when he said these words? It didn't happen.
Maybe because they saw that he wasn't a socialist anymore.
No, he says he's a socialist in his own words. I read it to you. I'll read
Yeah,
it one more
in
time.
1914.
You are wasting your breath. You will be forced into the war. That happened. You cannot get rid of me because I am, and I will always be a socialist. You hate me. You hate me because you still love me. What divides me from you now is not a small question. It's a big question which divides all socialism. So he's seeing the socialist divide. He's seeing a lot of infighting. Now, are you going to
Uh-huh.
claim that infighting itself means that you are not part of the I guess ideology anymore just because you infight?
It doesn't mean that, no, but
Okay.
Mussolini,
Oh,
after the war and when he started to, excuse me, I'm answering.
sorry. Yeah. So
When Mussolini accessed power and in the years leading to his accession to power, Mussolini wasn't running on a socialist platform, so he wasn't a socialist.
he definitely was. Okay. If you read on page 77, he was running on the fact that he wanted to organize the trade unions. So where are you getting this from? I'm trying to see the reference to conservatism. I see it all referencing socialism. I don't see any of this
He
reference
was
to conservatism at all.
he was beating up trade unionists.
Okay, that's infighting. Yes, the communists, they beat up the social democrats at the time. Does that mean they're not communists? Is that a direct one to
Do do communists beat up trade unionists when they are on strike and try to seize the means of production?
yes, the social democrats stop them from doing that. Does that mean they're not socialist in a way?
The Social Democrats
The social
the
democrats
Social
stopped
Democrats
Luxembourg.
stopped them because the Social Democrats were in power and the Social Democrats um,
Were they
passed
conservatives?
laws, pro-worker laws. Mussolini didn't.
Yeah, so were they conservatives? Because they stopped the communists. Were those guys considered conservatives since they beat up Rosa Luxemburg's movement at the time in Germany when they were going to have a revolution? And they got scared. So the Social Democrat Party got scared. Rosa Luxemburg had this small group that was about to uh, might have taken over the parliament at the time. And they were afraid of that because pretty much the Soviets had a small group take over all of Russia. So the Social Democrats got scared. Now, the fact that they beat them up, arrested some of their workers, and put them in jail, of the workers, the communist workers, does that mean they are not socialists anymore? Does that now automatically make them conservatives?
No, because they didn't pass conservative policies. On the
Great.
other hand, Mussolini did.
So now apply the same logic to Mussolini and the fascist movement. They beat up their opposition and they call themselves socialist. They call themselves trade unionist. So how does that not make them anymore if it didn't make the Social Democrats conservatives? Now, how does it now just automatically make Mussolini a conservative or the fascist?
The Social Democrats repressed a rebellion that was a rebellion against their rule. The
Okay,
Social Democrats were
like
controlling
the
the
answer,
state.
how does that make it?
Excuse me, I'm answering. The Social Democrats were controlling the state and they protected with military force their grasp on the political power. On the other hand, Mussolini and his organizations weren't in power, they weren't controlling the state, and yet they were taking initiatives to beat up strikers, to beat up workers seizing their own factories, which are things that socialist parties that are not in power would work together to achieve because they all want that.
You're missing the point, Jiha. I asked you, how does this make it conservative now? Not the fact that one had state power and the other one had some state alliance. Actually, yes, Mussolini was not in power at the time, but he had alliance in the state, and he had trade unionist friends to help him out. How does that make it conservatism? Because if it doesn't make the Social Democrats conservatives by beating up Rosa Luxemburg and her communist friends, how does it now make Mussolini the conservative? That doesn't make any logical sense at all.
Because if the Social Democrats were controlling the state, they weren't pushing their own ideology, they were protecting their political power. It was a
So
practical
the
consideration.
only
On
difference
the other hand,
is state
excuse
control.
me, on the other hand, Mussolini was attacking the trade unionists that were taking action because of his ideology.
They joined him.
So
I don't
that's
know
the
what
difference.
he attacked them from. He joined his movement. He helped form his own fascio, his own trade union, his own syndicate. He had socialist allies in governance at the time.
At what time?
Pre-war, during the and then after the war.
So first,
The only
pre-war and
is the state. You said the state is protecting its interest. So the Social Democrats are not conservatives because the state was protecting them. Where's the conservatism? That's what I'm trying to get at. You keep not answering that part of the question. Where is the conservatism? Where's the private property rights?
sure, it's easy. The conservatism of Mussolini, it's first opposition to communism by beating up trade unionists.
Okay,
it's
so
also pushing the nationalism of Italy, pushing for colonialism, Italian colonialism, the rebirth of the Roman Empire. It's also to do that. He also stoked racism in Italy. You look at colonial Italian propaganda; it's extremely racist. He also pushed for stronger gender roles against what communists and socialists pushed at the time. He also killed political opponents straight up, and especially left-wing ones. He also promoted war. So in Europe, obviously, there were the anti-Semitic laws, which you said that he did just to appeal to Hitler. But anti-Semitism was a strong characteristic of conservatism at the time. And also there was a strong anti-Semitic movement in the fascist party, and they actively participated in the Holocaust. So under the orders, the direct orders of Mussolini. So all of these are conservative policy. I can also cite other ones such as economic protectionism to strengthen national industry, again for the nationalism. Um, and I'm forgetting others probably. I would have to look at the taxes. I'm pretty sure he must have lowered them. Italian workers did lose rights under Mussolini. So yeah.
Yeah, so Mussolini didn't have the Oxford definition for an improvement of conservatism. He didn't improve the Wikipedia definition that you went on. You contradicted yourself. You said that the Social Democrats beat up the communists. That doesn't make them conservatives. But when Mussolini does it, yes, now he's the conservatives. He's part of the conservative movement. Hitler was about to join the SPD in 1919. Also pre-war, he was about to join it twice, pre-World War I, and he was going to join it afterwards. Where's the conservatism? Hitler beat up his conservative opponents like von Papen. So does that make him not a conservative? I don't know your standard of evidence. You keep pretty much going back and contradicting yourself. If the Social Democrats beat up the communists, why does you said already that does not make them conservative? But when Mussolini does, and then he ends up having power afterwards, and he kicks out some of the Marxist institutions while others did not get kicked out. Here's an example. If you go back in history, let's go to Farrell's Mussolini New Life, Chapter 5. In fact, the first fascio, called initially the Fascio Revoluzionaria de Azione Internazionalista, the Revolutionary Union of International Action. It was formed in October 1914 by others, in particular by the revolutionary syndicalists led by Corridoni and Massimo Rocca. Do you think Corridoni and Massimo Rocca were conservatives? And why did they stay with Mussolini's movement afterwards?
I have no idea who they are, so I can't really talk about them.
Okay.
I
want you to
I don't know if
the point of the social dems. Why? Okay, they're beating up the communists. They're not conservatives. But when Mussolini's black coats do it, or black shirts do it, they're the conservatives now. How does that make any logical sense? Because this seems to be
I
your
think
only
I've
point of
explained.
contradiction. This is your only point. It seems to be kind of irking you. That's
My
very
only point, I have highlighted several points of Mussolini's policies that were
Mussolini
conservative.
yourself. He said he didn't want to remove the monarch, but he didn't like the monarch because their policy was detrimental. So he didn't remove them, but he took away the power. That means he didn't like them. That doesn't mean he liked the monarchy. There's a lot of points you're making that are just not relevant to fascism itself. And it's not even relative to conservatism. Hitler had struggle finding investors because he didn't have a clear social policy. He didn't have a clear economic policy. Mussolini also struggled with finding investors because he didn't have a clear economic policy. And the point of the anti-Semitism, that was only in 1938. That was only when he wanted to have a pact with Hitler in the war effort. He was anti-war, then he became pro-war because he wanted to be part of this new oncoming world order that he thought was going to achieve dominance, but did not. And we know why it didn't, because they ran out of reserves. Their rail lines got bombed. Their central planning policies didn't work. Where is the conservatism? That's what I'm trying to get at. Where? Let's go back to what you said in the wiki page because you like it. So we'll go to conservatism wiki again. Where is Mussolini in all of his efforts doing any of this? Cultural, social, political philosophy to promote and preserve traditional institutions. Where? That was not traditional. Him making the fascio was not traditional. Um,
You don't see how trying to rebuild the Roman Empire is a conservative goal in
no,
Italy.
the Roman Empire, they didn't want nuclear family. That was not a thing back in the day. And the Roman Empire were not conservatives. They were the Roman Empire. It was a gigantic state running everything. Do you see
Uh-huh.
conservatives to today say we want the state to control everything? Do you see them doing that today? They didn't do that in the past. Do you see them do that today?
Yeah, kind of. They don't say it, but they do it. Yeah.
They don't say it, but they do it. Like what? What conservatives are doing the full state control of society?
Yeah, like for example, you have the whole surveillance state that was built during mostly Bush.
What's the name?
Um,
Say it again.
Sorry,
What's the name?
the surveillance state under Bush.
This Bush ran all the institutions like the Roman Empire. They had
No, I'm giving an example of a conservative increasing the power of the state over society.
yeah, the USSR did that as well. Catalonia did that. So
Yeah, and the USSR, I would argue, was run by conservatives. Yeah.
yeah, they definitely were not. They kicked out or killed actually killed a ton of investors and people who had traditional values. They got rid of religion, and religion is part here on the wiki page that you keep mentioning. Organized religion. The USSR didn't have organized religion, and they didn't have property rights and a monarchy at all. So all of this is not following any of what you believe is what conservatives are or what conservatism is. You seem to be cherry picking for I don't know what reason you're doing. You're cherry picking certain things and saying, look, this is somewhat correlated to fascism, which it isn't. That's what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah.
Why is it that your
What
tenet of
elements
conservatism is not at all at the tenets of fascism?
what elements have I cherry picked, for example?
Okay,
Because I've cited a lot. Can you cite me some
traditional
examples?
values. What socialists wanted traditional values? What fascists wanted traditional values? If you want to go back to Mussolini's doctrine or Gentile's doctrine, the Fascio Revolucionaria de Arisione Internationalista, a fascist international revolutionized movement. What of that is conservative?
When was it that he was part of this movement?
He did this in 1914.
Okay, in 1914. When did he access power?
Um, Let me see, 30. Let me see, Mussolini power into power. 22.
Okay, so that's a few years of difference, yes.
Sure, but what's the difference in policy? You have to state the difference in policy. I have the same policy here. It says in 23, this is in A New Life, chapter 7. Immediately, the Italian left branded fascism a reactionary force in the service of the bourgeois. It would keep on saying so. History, by the large, has accepted this definition of fascism, but fascism was anything but a right wing movement. So this is the primary source. Um, This is Nicholas Burgess Farrell. He's, I think, a journalist and a historian. He's citing it not being a right wing movement. So I don't know where anyone's getting this notion that they're conservatives at all. Even Orwell stated it. Did you see what Orwell said?
No, what did he say?
Fascism. He didn't say it was right wing. He said it was stemming from social
Yeah,
elements,
from socialist elements.
radical socialist elements.
Yeah, so originally there were some radical socialist elements that helped create fascism.
Yeah.
However, fascism since then developed. Okay, it didn't stay the few hundreds of radical socialists that were angry at the mainstream socialist parties. Okay, it became more. It opened itself to new thoughts and new ideas, conservatives ideas that were anti-communist,
Oh, you
that were nationalistic, that were patriarchal, that were racist, pro-colonialism, that idealized their history. So that's why they seeked to rebuild the Roman Empire. It's because for them it was their own tradition. The Roman Empire was in their past.
see,
They wanted to rebuild to continuate Italian tradition. So yeah, that's conservatism.
You're connecting dots that are not there. You just said they opened up to new versions of conservatism. Conservatism itself is not new. It's supposed to be of a tradition. So this is
new for them.
You're saying it opened up new ideals. Mussolini opened up new ideals to conservative elements of having nationalism. No, not at all. The Social Democrats were nationalists. The communists were nationalists.
They were?
Yes.
No.
You're seeming like nationalism is this conservative. Even in the wiki, it doesn't state it at all. It states it about tradition, religious values, monarchy, and property rights. Those are the majority of what you said in the wiki. What you didn't say, but I finished it in the wiki article.
Yeah, nationalism is one of the traditional values.
Rights under Mussolini of the Fascist Party. If you want to go back to what happened in the 20s, he emerged from Italian socialism in 19. This is from Gentile himself. He says Mussolini emerged from Italian socialism in 1915 in order to become a more faithful interpreter of the will of the people of Italy, to whom he, already editor of the socialist paper Avanti, wished to devote his new journal, Popolo d'Italia. Fast forward, Gentile says he had struggled against masonry while a socialist. Inspired by Sorelian syndicalism, he opposed the parliamentary corruption of reformism with the idealistic postulates of revolution and violence in the name of revolution. Outside the ranks of official socialism, he continued his battle against his older comrades, defending the rationale of the war afterwards, defending the infrangible moral and economic wholeness of the national organism against the lying fictions of internationalism. Where is that in any of the conservative doctrine that you've been talking about? This is pretty much the rise of Mussolini. And then if you want to go to afterwards saying, look, he jailed some of his dissidents. Let's go to his campaign in 20s. He argued for the sanctity of the fatherland and for the working class. Do you think that the conservatives cared about the working class? I'm going to guess you probably don't, right? Do you think the conservatives cared about the working class at the time?
The conservatives don't care about the working class. However, you can see, excuse me, you can see a lot of conservatives that appeal and pretend to care about the working class in order to raise more support. They are lying. Their policies don't support the working class, but they pay lip service to it. Also, I wanted to just quickly say I'm looking at the economic policy of Mussolini, and I see, so he accessed to power in 1922.
Yep.
And you were saying that he was a socialist at that time. So when in power, he should have sought to put in place a socialist economic policy.
He did.
However, he appointed as an economic minister, he appointed Alberto De Stefani, who was a classical liberal economist. classical liberals are opponents to socialism. A socialist won't appoint as Minister of the Economy a classical liberal. Who will appoint a classical liberal to the economy? A capitalist.
Okay, so do you think the neoliberals at the time, those were conservatives?
Neoliberalism is an ideology that appeared after World War II. So there were no neoliberals at the
Classical
time.
liberals, I mixed it up, sorry. The classical liberals, are those guys conservatives?
They can be, or they can be liberal left.
Was that
Depends.
guy, the man he put in charge, was he a conservative or classical liberal?
I think he was conservative because he cut taxes and curbed spending. It's not
You see how
really
you're
left wing.
adding extra stuff. So when you go back to what your wiki page, because I'm going to put you to your fundamentals here. So if you go back to the wiki page, where does it say tax cuts?
So on the wiki page of Economy of Fascist Italy,
No,
it says
not conservatism, because we're going back on
of conservatism.
yeah, where's the tax cuts here? Nuclear family, organized religion, military, property rights, monarchy, political philosophy of tradition. Where's tax cuts?
You do live in the US?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Conservative Party in the US pushes tax cuts.
Democrats push tax cuts as well. Are they conservative?
They can be, yeah.
Okay, so it just seems like you're just lumping everything into conservatives. You're not following the wiki page as you stated. You're just lumping it in. Why are you doing that?
Yeah, you know how the wiki page they talk that conservatism seeks to promote property rights.
Yeah, and where's the property rights?
Yeah, if you cut
All that ended
taxes,
up, all
you
it did was to just make money for the war effort.
if you cut taxes, so if you lower taxes, you help rich people keep their property. You strengthen the property rights of rich people, the people at the top of the social hierarchy. This social hierarchy is a tradition of the country, okay? Because capitalism has been in place for about at that time it was about 150 years, something like that. Rich wealth also has been a social value to be pursued for basically millennia at that point. So yeah, strengthening the power of rich people, strengthening their property rights, it is conservative.
Okay, now where did Mussolini strengthen the power of these conservatives? Because he made a
He
lot of
cut their taxes.
his the business at the time convert to trade unionism, where he had to pretty much run the businesses through his middleman.
That's
Where's that
false. No,
traditional
he
conservative?
cut taxes on rich people, so that means that they were richer, so more powerful.
Cut taxes. What date? What plan? What policy did he do this?
It was the policies of Alberto De Stefani between
No,
1922 and 1925.
right. What policy? What was it? What was the exact policy in 1925? Where did he cut taxes?
Well, I don't know. It's written that
Yes. Can you
it's what
cite
he
it? You
done.
got to cite it. If you're just going to say it from a secondary source, you're not getting the info. I give you primary sources on fascism not being conservatism because it comes from socialism. So where is it? Which policy was a tax cut that he did?
Let's search then.
Yeah, where? I got everything but. Are we gonna continue or Q and A's? What's the deal?
Well, I don't know. I'm looking on Google now that you're asking for sources for that, but yeah.
Oh, so you want?
Do you like the Cato Institute?
Do I like what?
The Cato Institute.
Cato. Yeah.
Yeah,
They're
you
all
like
right.
them or no?
They're decent, but what do they say?
They're decent. Okay. So the economic leadership secrets of Benito Mussolini. Let's see.
Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. I got to get you. I'm sorry about this, Jehan. I'm reading some of
Yeah.
Umberto's work. I'm going to go to Umberto Eco, Your Fascism, New York Books. Look what it says. I know this might upset you, but here it is. It says fascism became an all purpose term because one can eliminate from a fascist regime one or more features and it will still be recognizable as fascist. Continuing,
Uh-huh.
he says, take away imperialism from fascism, and you still have Franco and Salazar. Take away colonialism, and you still have the Balkan fascism of the Ustashis. And let me just get it. Page, next page. Add to the Italian fascism a radical anti capitalism, which never much fascinated Mussolini, and you have Ezra Pound. All right, there it is. Umberto himself says in Your Fascism, NewYorkBooks.com. I'll send you the link if you want. He says the Italian fascism was a radical anti-capitalism. Now what, buddy?
How I pointed to Mussolini's actual policies when in power. So the Cato Institute, for example, says
Let's go to that.
Mussolini appoint. Excuse me.
Let's go to that one. Yeah.
Mussolini appointed Alberto De Stefani, a man with free market economic views, as his Minister of Finance. De Stefani simplified the tax code, cut taxes, curbed spending, liberalized trade restrictions, and abolished rent controls.
All right. Let's go to Cato.
So
Let's see their source first. Where's the
that's
source?
pretty capitalistic.
All right, but let's go to Cato's source. We're gonna go to Cato, Mussolini. What'd you put in
Mhm.
Mussolini, finance minister?
Yeah, the title of the article is The Economic Leadership Secrets of Benito Mussolini
All right.
by Jim Powell.
Let's see. There's
Jim Powell,
yeah.
who is an expert in the history of liberty.
I
So,
bet you he's not, but we'll see. Jim
yeah.
Powell, senior fellow. Did you read the whole article? Because this, if you read the whole article, I just scrolled past it. It's like the sixth stanza down.
Yeah, it's pretty far down, I think. But no, I just read the
Right.
passage that was interesting me.
Do you see where it says number two? It's like the eighth paragraph down. It says economic fascism is a variety of socialism. Individual
Yeah,
rights may be routinely suppressed in the name of social justice, national greatness, or some other utopian ideal. The economic program of Italian fascism did not differ from the program of British Guild socialism, as propagated by the most eminent British and European socialists. See, for example, Sidney and Beatrice Webb's A Consultation of Socialist Commonwealth of Great Britain. Number three, the government becomes dysfunctional because of runaway spending, unsustainable debt, a war gone wrong, or other crisis. People often clamor for a strong man to restore order. Where was any of that in the wiki page for conservatism?
why should it be in the wiki
Because you
page of
cited the page for the definition. So I'm trying to keep you to some standards instead of just adding, oh, look, tax breaks. Oh, look, this. You can't add. I want you to get back to your fundamentals before you add anything. Where is this in the fundamentals?
the tax breaks? I'm sorry, I don't understand
Okay,
your question.
how about that? Where's tax breaks in the wiki article? Where does it say that?
For conservatism?
Yeah, in the wiki conservatism article. Where does it say
Ah,
tax?
yeah, that's when it refers to property rights.
No, you're assuming that because a tax break can have. You could put a tax break and you can give it to some socialist program or some just regular social program, like the Boston Commission and the Social Security Trust Fund. That was a tax break. It didn't go to private property. It went to the Social Security Trust Fund. So it's not all the time private property. And I
Well,
remember you saying an exception breaks the rule, so that's an exception. Do you still agree that that's a tax break is somehow conservatism?
generally, yes.
Generally, okay.
I don't understand.
So it was never in the wiki article. Are we just going to go with whatever you believe conservatism is then? Because we're not. I guess we're not using the wiki article no more.
Yeah, we are.
Okay,
We
good.
are using the wiki article, and you are debating my interpretation of it. Yeah.
Okay. So your interpretation is nothing compared to any of what it says in the article. That's what I'm trying to get at. There's nothing about tax breaks in there that makes it conservative.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to pretend that tax breaks aren't a conservative
I'm
thing,
trying
then
to
I don't
your
know.
fundamentals. There's not. So it seems like you're switching the standard of evidence for yourself and for what we're talking about. Fascism has no elements. Even Umberto himself, he said it was anti-capitalist. Um, I just read that to you. I could send you the article of his exact words himself. I will send that if you like. You know what? I'll send it right. I'll DM you. Why not? I'll DM you right here.
Sure, sure. Fascist movements have an anti-capitalist rhetoric, but in practice, they don't have anti-capitalist
Well,
policies.
Umberto says that's not the case.
Yeah, which policy is he referring to?
Let's see. I'm gonna give you his Your Fascism book.
Mhm. Well, it's going to take a while for me to read it, so maybe not today.
Here you go. Sending it right now.
Yeah, thanks. So you want me to read the whole book now, or?
No, but I'll reference you where he says it. He's definitely he says Mussolini was anti-capitalist. Do you think conservatives are anti-capitalist?
No, they are not, but sometimes they attack
I need to get
issues caused by capitalism. Yeah, it
I
happens.
need to get you to something that is a standard of evidence. You keep switching it on me. None of the fascism fit any of the definition of conservatism in the wiki article, and tax breaks are not also in that definition. Just the fact that he put somebody for tax breaks or what they think is tax breaks, and then in the rest of the Cato article it says, well, it seems to be like he's doing a ton of government spending on social programs and he's increasing the national debt. That's not
Hmm.
conservative. That's not in the conservative article. So you keep
Well,
switching your standard of evidence. I can't get you to anything that a journalist or historian is talking about. You just keep kind of like making it up.
because I'm saying that tax
I know
breaks
you're saying
and
that not referenced anywhere.
I've explained why it's linked to property rights.
Okay, and I explained why it's not linked to property rights. Now what?
Then you're wrong. I don't
No.
know.
Look at the Boston Commission. They pretty much did a tax break for the Social Security Fund to get more money.
So they exempted a
Here,
social security fund from taxes.
say it again.
The Basking Commission, they exempted a social security fund from taxes, right?
They pretty much did a tax cut. It's considered a tax cut. Where pretty much they rigged the CPI so that the Social Security Trust Fund could get more money. And this you cannot I can't go to the Social Security Trust Fund myself and just take it out and say, all right, I'm going to spend it. I have to be part of it. It's social spending. It's not conservative spending. It's not property rights. I'm trying. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, where are you getting this from? It's nowhere in the wiki
Well,
for fascism.
one
Nowhere in
what I'm trying what I'm trying to understand is how a social security fund is getting more money because of less government taxes.
not less. It's less. Okay, it's a tax break. It's not less government taxation. It's a tax break. You're taking a break. So it's some time you're increasing more funds in a program. Can I right now go to the Social Security Trust Fund, take money out, and spend it? Can I do that?
I don't know, can you?
No, I cannot. I have to wait
Okay,
in advance to do that. It's not
okay.
my private property, yet I pay into it. I pay Social Security taxes. So if I'm paying taxes into it, why am I not getting a tax break? So cutting taxes is not fundamentally conservative. That's what I'm trying to get to the point. It's not fundamentally conservative at all. And if you want to go to
Well, what you're
far right conservatives like the Austrian economist, those guys did not like tax cuts or tax breaks.
so what you're telling me is that this social security fund is funded thanks to taxes on you,
It's funded
but
by it.
you don't get a tax break. So
It's a
what
tax
I'm trying to understand
security
is
fund.
where is the tax cut here?
Yes, it's a
Sorry?
tax cut for the fund. The Boston Commission did a tax cut for the Social Security fund, not me. I don't have private ownership over that fund.
The fund was getting taxed before and then it
Yes, there was
stopped
less money
being taxed.
going into it when they before the CPI got rejiggered.
Taxes are
Now there's
taking
more
money away from the fund. It's not putting more money inside.
it's considered a tax break because it's giving money taxes. It's cutting the CPI numbers that which are determined in the fund. So the Social Security Trust Fund says this is the amount of money that people are able to get, or we could increase or decrease it dependent on a certain CPI figure. So they changed it. They changed the CPI figure. Now more money is in the trust fund, and more people on Social Security themselves can use it. But that's not private property. They're using a social program that they paid earlier in life, or that I'm paying right now, to use more money from. So they call it a tax cut or a tax break, but in reality, it's just borrowing currency for taxes that are there, and I'm not able to take any profits only or any money at all. Only people on the program are able to take that. So if it's not private
Okay, so
property for me, why is it? Why is that now just? It doesn't have to be conservatism anymore or not? Like I don't understand your position. If you're
okay,
not following the wiki
I
page,
think I understand the issue.
yeah,
So here it's a program to compensate inflation to avoid the fund from losing money from inflation by a measure which is called a tax break,
yeah,
with the state that pays back the inflation to the fund, kind of, right?
I say the last part. I could barely hear you.
Yeah, so the state pays money to the fund
Yeah,
to compensate the inflation.
yes,
Okay, so this is not a tax cut. This is called a tax break.
okay, but
What I was talking about was a tax cut, which is when you have a tax level, like I don't know, 20%,
seventy
and
percent.
you lower that tax level. Okay, so it goes from 20% to 15%, for example.
Okay,
This is not a tax break. This is a tax cut.
yeah, okay. So where is that in? Are you going to still follow the wiki article for conservatism, or are we just going to follow your own?
Yeah,
Version?
so when you cut taxes, you take less money from people. That
Okay,
means you leave more property to them. You strengthen their property rights.
you are not strengthening their property rights. You're just giving them. They're just able to give you less money. It's less taxes they have to pay.
Yes, so their
Okay,
property rights are less infringed on by the state.
but okay, the point of the art a wiki article is not it's less infringed. It says strong. Here, we'll go back. It says
Yeah, a right that
yeah,
is less infringed on is stronger.
there he goes again. One more time. Conservatism wiki article. Promote a range of social institutions like the nuclear family, organized religion, the military, property rights, and monarchy. Okay, now if it was enforcing property rights, wouldn't theoretically you say they would have no taxes?
No taxes? I mean, they could try, but they can't run the state without taxes. So,
Okay,
no.
so it's not actually enforcing property rights. It's just saying, hey,
Yes, it is.
a little bit more. That's it, not full property rights.
Well, the thing is, to enforce property rights, you do need a state, and that state needs to be funded by taxes.
I want to again, this is not conservative. I'm trying to get you to a standard of evidence because you have not proved Umberto's point. You haven't proved the 14 points. You haven't proved Davies and Lynch's point, Griffin, Calley, Hartley's. None of the people who are saying it's conservative or right wing, none of them are referencing or pointing to any point in fascism as conservatism. So it seems like we're going away from the fundamentals and the sources. We're just going to hypotheticals now. Now you're hypothetically saying
Well, I just pointed out to a policy of a specific minister under Mussolini, for example.
And then if you read the rest of the article, it continues to say, well, he just went to social funding and social spending, which a lot of social democrats did, and a lot more Nazis and fascists did a lot more social spending than any of the socialist parties that were about to become in power or powers before, right? Any powers before at the time, they did a lot more social spending. So
Hmm.
how can they be both
Yeah,
conservative and socialist? I don't understand that point.
yeah, that's an interesting paradox. That's
No.
because Mussolini is a fascist, a capitalist. So
Oh,
he defers to capitalist economics first, but also he needs to strengthen his power, to strengthen his popularity. He can't do that by giving more rights to people because that's counter to fascism. Okay, fascism takes away rights to control people. He can do that by setting up social programs. These social programs can also be used to propagate fascist values. For example, fascist values can be about you want women making more kids. So you're going to glorify mothers. You're going to I don't know do a better Mother's Day, but that's not enough. Okay, because women are not going to have 10 kids just because you're saying mothers are nice. So what do? You give money to mothers getting kids. This is a social program that is used to pursue a fascist goal, which is to have women at home, barefoot and pregnant.
yes, we've established the contradictory nature of Mussolini's and his finance minister's policy. Where
It's not
is it
contradictory.
fundamentally conservative? Because that's the original claim, is that fascism is conservative. I have a lot of sources, and as we've just established, pointing it to socialism, not coming from conservative roots, not even having conservative policies. They have contradictory policies, yes, but where is this fundamentally conservative? We have not seen any evidence of that itself. And here, I'm going
Well,
to
in my example, for example, so the social program to encourage birth, it's a social program that strengthens a traditional system, which is the patriarchy. Okay, so women stay at home, men go to work, women make children, they take care of the children, and such.
yeah, I
That social
understand.
program is used for a conservative goal. So it is a conservative policy.
But it has more socialist elements to it, being called syndicates. The trade unions, even during Mussolini's reign, were called fascios. So you can't
Uh-huh.
say that they were not, these are now conservative movements. That's what I'm trying to get at. If it's contradictory, I think we agree on that. But saying that it's
So
fundamentally conservative, I don't see, we haven't even established that at all.
I think I have, but you seem to be confused because of the name of the organizations Mussolini made.
Not just the name, their policy proposals as well.
Well, I have
They do
give gave I have given some examples of actual policies Mussolini put in place,
yeah,
and they aren't socialist.
and I got the historian saying he did a lot of social spending, which is socialist. So it's
Well, maybe
contradictory.
the historians are wrong.
We did establish it's contradictory. We didn't establish that it's fundamentally conservative, though. That we did not establish because there's no evidence of that. That's why I think the claim
If
fascism is conservatism to the extreme is just nonsense. It doesn't have a history of it. It doesn't have policy proposals of it. No, Oswald Mosley, Mussolini, they didn't follow any conservative policies at all. They didn't enforce private property rights. They took them away. That's what I'm trying to get at. All the evidence is pointing to not conservatism or just socialism. That's where it's pointing to. So, since that's the case, we haven't established it being conservative at all. We just established there's contradictory policies. That's it. Do you think that's a more fundamental explanation of fascism? It's this contradiction of, I guess, a nationalist, some traditional values, which is kind of weird because Mussolini had a mistress. So I mean, he's cheating on his girlfriend or whatever. So he's not really a conservative if you want to put it in that manner. So again, we agree it's contradictory, but we don't see it fundamentally being conservative. That's what I'm trying to get at. And I think there's been no evidence from any of the historians like James Greg, journalists as well, like George Sorrell, James Greger, and Nicholas Beers-Farrell, and even Umberto himself said it was anti-capitalist. And I sent it to you. I sent a nice DM for that for you.
Wow,
So
Yeah, the red.
I don't know.
since that just naturally transferred over to Elijah's closing statement, would you like to make one now, Jehan?
Sure, yeah.
All right.
So I think I have shown that fascism and conservatism are at their core the same ideology. Simply, fascism is more violent, uses more violent means, and promotes violence more, and also puts in place regimes that are more authoritarian. But since they are the same at the base, conservatism can easily become fascism. So I gave some examples for so at the start, for example, in the Cold War. For Mussolini, I gave some examples so about economic policy that were conservatives. Either they were economically conservative or they were social programs that were pursuing conservative goals, such as strengthening the patriarchy, with geopolitical policies that were pursuing conservative goals, such as making the Roman Empire great again, more colonies, more racism, say getting back some European territories too, um, stuff like that. Also, racial policies with the anti-Semitic law. You can say all you want, but Mussolini wasn't anti-Semitic. When he passes anti-Semitic policies, it is an anti-Semitic ideology. Um, and I think I did pretty well here. My issue is that if you're referring to historians, I can answer arguments from historians. I can't answer names. So yeah.
All right. Thank you, Jehan. And now it is time for our audience question. Let me put it that way, because we have one. This comes from Hillary's emails, and they ask, does Jehan think that international communism seeking world domination in 1903 to 1993 was a conservative appeal to tradition of reestablishing the Roman Empire?
Well, the Roman Empire wasn't spanning the whole world. I don't think international communist movements were referencing the Roman Empire. There was no will to put in place an emperor. So no, I don't think so.
You can answer that too if you'd like, Elijah.
Yeah, the Roman Empire did not follow any of the Wikipedia points about conservatism, and I definitely don't think the USSR at the time, or the maybe the Bolshevik Revolution, was going to follow any form of conservatism at all. They killed a lot of the financial capitalists at the time. They just either jailed them or just straight up just murdered them in the street. Um, no, that's not a conservative movement. Like the Bolshevik Revolution, the USSR, none of the they banned religion, right? That was part of the points in the wiki article. So since they banned religion, they banned private property rights. Those were not conservative, and Jehan said they were. The USSR is considered conservative, but when I try to reference the point on infighting, and it just seems very contradictory. So I would say it's not. It is not a conservative movement. The USSR, the Bolsheviks.
Well, thank you very much,
Uh,
Elijah.
if if I can just add something, because I think the person that asked the question was a bit confused by my argument. I wasn't saying conservatives movements all seek to re-establish the Roman Empire. I was saying that the Mussolini, the fascist party in Italy, was seeking to re-establish the Roman Empire, which was conservative in the context of Italy. Okay, so it was making Italy great again. And when was Italy great? At the time of the Roman Empire. That's what I meant.
And a slogan is not a conservative point. All right, that was fun.
All right, I'd like to thank you both for a very interesting and informative and entertaining debate, and I'd like to thank our audience for coming tonight. And I hope you enjoyed our show. I will fix all the relevant links in our description. I promise. And if you like these guys' performance here, remember to subscribe to our channel. Click that like button so that you can always catch our next show. Um, Thanks again for coming. Remember, let's not fight. Let's debate the topics and let's talk about the issues.
Organizing this debate, and thank you, Elijah, for providing a contrary argument. It was a nice debate.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for coming, man. I'm glad you came. But are we offline? Or are we still
Now,
going? We
yeah,
still rolling?
we will be. Thanks again, everybody, for
Okay,
coming.
cool.
Have a great
Thanks.
night.